Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot once again. Just as Trump is going to become the president of the United States and is going to be sworn in and all that indoors, we're going to discuss Trump, the global order, and what it means for India. And we're going to have a lot of discussion on this. And to do all this, I have the person whom I really believe has a pulse of USA, Brigadier Arun Sahgal. Right? I'm sure he's got a lot to say to us and lot for us to imbibe. But just to put the thing in perspective, ever since Trump has won the election till now, there's been a lot of talk. I'll do this, I'll do that, and he's really shaken up the world, whether we like it or not. Everyone is looking forward to the time when Trump is going to come in and do whatever he has to do. And it seems as if he's got a magic wand where he'll switch it around and the Ukraine war will stop and Gaza will stop and all that. And lo and behold, he said before I assume presidency, this Gaza thing should come to an end. And it has come to an end. That's the funny part of the whole story. Right? And it's very interesting. Will Ukraine follow? And if Ukraine follows, what next? And he's made some overtures to China which have generally not been made so far. Uncharacteristic. But completely in character with the Trump character. Or the character of the Trump. Right. But that's much more. And what's there in it for India? Everything. I yield the floor to Brigadier Sahgal. Sir, good evening and welcome. Sorry for this lengthy kind of an introduction, but over to you.
No. It's great, sir. It's great. Okay. Thank you very much. It's an important topic coming on the eve of, from Indian perspective, on the inauguration of the 47th US President, Donald Trump, under great circumstances, and all his statements that he's been making prior to his inauguration. I will be looking at the world slightly differently. I look at the emerging global orders. What are the contours of this? And then I will, in the second part, look at India's major power relationships and its other relationships and some economic and other aspects which will have an impact on India as we move into the 2025. We have to understand that India is not totally linked to the United States. India is an independent power of its own. It has its own influence, its own space. And we are going to be discussing how the global geopolitical equations will impact Indian strategic space, India's economic space, etc. That's what is going to be the fundamental points that I'm trying to make. What I start by saying is that the world is in disarray. All major players are jockeying for power and influence. While there is a strategic competition amongst all three players, it is equal reality that they are all in strategic decline. Their power and influence are declining, be it United States, be it China, and be it Russia. As far as US is concerned, its ability to reorder, reshape, and influence the global order is under severe contest. This point was highlighted by none other than Jack Sullivan when on his final interview, he said, yes, America is no longer a unipolar player. We have to be sensitive to the requirements and the demands of the other world. He did not accept the world as a multipolar, but he said that there are a large number of powers and factors which will influence the global order. So, we are also looking at the perspective. United States power and influence in the Biden administration, as it leaves it today, we are seeing it that it could not influence the situation in the Middle East. Although on the dying day, he has got a ceasefire going in Gaza. It is in the first 6 weeks of the ceasefire. We'll see what happens later on. But the fact of the remain is that the rest of the Gulf, rest of the Middle East is in turmoil. Syria has collapsed as a nation, with multiple players trying to vie for influence over there. So we are seeing that issue over there. In middle in Indo-Pacific, there is turbulence going on. United States power and influence in Indo-Pacific is getting constrained. China itself is not being able to influence the region too much beyond a certain point, apart from following what we call a gray zone strategy. Russia, on its own, has been fighting now for the third year in war with Ukraine. It is severely stretched economically, politically, and militarily. And as a parting present, Biden administration has imposed severe energy sanctions on Russia. So the issue basically is that all the three major powers, while they have an influence in the global geopolitics, but the ability to shape the geopolitics is coming under severe stress. This is a larger point I was trying to make. The second point I'm trying to make in the global order is that the emergence of BRICS, which indicates the growing influence of emerging economies. New regional alliances, bilateral and multilateral trade agreements signify expansion of BRICS. Today, there are 10 or 9, I think, 9 countries in BRICS. There are 15 supporting members who have not been inducted as yet, but who have become members. And interestingly, 2 of them are from ASEAN, Indonesia, Malaysia. So the question basically is that this is now emerging as a new power center. The emerging economies consolidating their power and influence, developing trade synergies, are now becoming a new power center, and they are also becoming a political power center. See the way South Africa took Israel to International Court of Justice. See how they are managing the climate change. So this is a new balance that is emerging, which will have to be take cognizance of. Trump might say that de-dollarization is unacceptable to me and I'll put 100% tariffs, etc., etc., etc. But if you start looking at the trade figures amongst these countries who do not have to go to West and who have to do trade among themselves, the ability of the West to shape the trade and economic discourse of the global South and the emerging countries, the middle powers, is severely constrained. So when statements are being made in terms of tariffs and imposition of etc., my humble submission is that we need to take these issues with a pinch of salt and do some little bit of research to understand their implication. Then the next issue is from an Indian perspective. So there is now an East-West balance of power, or let's put it this way, East-West balance within the construct of emerging South. East-West and emerging South. Now the question for India is this. In this global balance of power, how does India play its cards? There is a strong Western linkage to India. Our relationship with the United States is strong. Our United States is the largest trading partner. It's an important strategic player. It is a part of our Indo-Pacific. We are part of quadrilateral. Similarly, India has got a large number of economic and political stakes in Europe. So to that extent, and particularly the Trump administration, I'll come to that a little later, would look at India as a much more sanguine and a much more important player as part of the Western narrative of dealing with the geostrategic problems than India being as a neutral player or a non-aligned player. On the other hand, India has strong relationship with Russia. India India is trying to build up its relationship with China following the thaw. So the question that comes about is that how does India play its card? And the next point is Europe. Europe is in political turmoil. Europe is in economic turmoil. Europe has very severe security challenges. It is incapable of looking after its own security at this point in time. Should there be a certain degree of a ceasefire? While people might look at Ukrainian ceasefire from termination of conflict, but what we need to look at the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine from the larger European politics and the status of NATO. If there is a ceasefire over here, and Russia, which has already initiated a strong militarization programs and building up capacities and capabilities, guess the window of 5 to 10 years, it will emerge as a strong military power. Will that military power can it and Europe sustain that military power? And what does ceasefire and improvement in relations between Russia and America mean? Please understand, America is an offshore power, whereas European construct, that is NATO and particularly the Western Europe countries, with the strongest countries in Europe, are in place. They feel the heat of the Russian economic, political, and resource influence. So this is something which will need to be looked upon. So as far as Middle East is concerned, we are seeing a certain degree of improvement. We hope the ceasefire holds. But the question is, what happens to Iran? There are two disquieting reports which are coming. One is recently we have just heard that Iran has built up a 500-meter deep missile base at the mouth of Persian Gulf. It is fast-tracking its nuclear program. How do you manage Iran? And there is also, if you are to believe Mr. Sergei, the Russian foreign minister, he categorically said that we have a quadrilateral operating, and that quadrilateral is Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, and he wants India to be part of it. So this is a new quadrilateral or a five-power nation relationship which they want to create. India certainly cannot become part of that, particularly for the obvious reasons. But the fundamental point is to contest the West. There is this new power relationship is coming up. So this is the new element of power influence over here. And in the global South, there is incremental influence of China as well as Russia. The West is physically present only in terms of limited influence. My last point is in terms of influence of Chinese beyond. I talked about China or America being a constrained power. China itself is also a constrained power. China can only influence in the continental domain and limited in the maritime domain. It still does not have the attributes of a strong blue water navy as yet, ability to project power. We have seen that in the events that unfolded in the Middle East, despite having its interest in Saudi Arabia, despite having its interest in the Gulf, Chinese were by and large bystanders. So this is the reason I'm mentioning all this is about the geopolitical aspect is that it is a huge flux that is operating. Before I come to global geoeconomic order, I will request General Shankar if he has any points to.
Well, I go with you, sir. I think you brought out very important points. All the big powers or the recognized big powers, China, Russia, and USA, are in strategic decline. And let me qualify more than what you have said. Uh, USA, despite the fact that Trump has come out successful in this election, is still a divided nation. He might have the popular vote, but it's not by a large margin. So it's not going to be an easy presidency for him the way it is being made out. I'm just adding to what you're saying.
Sure.
And it's not going to be easy presidency. Much, despite his bluster, after the initial issues, there are going to be problems, and most of his problems are internal. And if you see 75% of his orientation is internal, my view is for the best part of the next 2 to 3 years, we might find USA more of an inward looking nation uh, than it was before. Or the other way I put it, it'll be less outward looking, less internationalist in its outlook for many reasons.
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned about Russia emerging as a big player, a big military power, relative to the decline of Europe, which is there's no doubt about it. It's relative to the decline of Europe because
Yes.
Europe and its security are at stake for itself. And this post-Ukraine situation uh, holds a lot of flux. But the fact also remains that if and when this war ends, Russia will be a post-war economy. So it has its own issues. And I don't know whether Russia will be able to come up and exert its influence the way it used to have, because it is virtually out of the Middle East now.
Yes.
Right. And it has to go to, like we know, the Tartus base has gone to Benghazi and things like that. So it's virtually out of the Middle East. And the Middle East is central to world geopolitics and geoeconomics to a large extent. Like you rightly said, China is virtually marginalized away from global affairs. Despite all its bluster, it has problems in its periphery. All its reactions have induced opposite reactions from its peripheral nations who are very wary of it and who play a very big constraining role on China. China doesn't have any leg to stand on, a big leg to stand on in the Middle East, and it has severe internal problems. I mean, much we don't focus on that.
Yes.
And this is my underlining view is that China is a rich state with poor people. And this imbalance will always affect China. And it will continue to affect China for a long time to come because it is against the Chinese ethos to make their people rich. And especially till such time Xi Jinping is there. Like you also said, a lot of things, what you said, actually, I'm qualifying it in different words. The global south has its own aspirations. And gone are the days when they're prepared to even accept anyone's diktat, uh, leave alone the big powers. I think the big powers also have to jockey for influence in the global south. A prime example is our neighbor, Bangladesh. Not Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Despite all the assistance we gave to them, Sri Lanka has gone and opted for an investment of $3 to $4 billion from China recently for an oil refinery there. So things are changing. The geoeconomics are also changing. Right. So this is where we are. And the interesting point you brought out is the new quadrilateral of Russia, China, Iran, and Pakistan, which we'll have to see, because that I'm sure Russia is alive to the fact that we cannot be part of any equation where Pakistan is on the same side. Or rather, Pakistan will also not be comfortable with the whole thing. And we have to see that. And in this context, where India heads is a issue which I'm sure you will discuss. Uh, yeah, how India plays its card, that's what you said, is very important. Uh, and I also feel that India has also to overcome its own internal contradictions. While our thing, why I'm talking of internal contradictions is when the going is good, when our economy is going firing on all cylinders, we tend to paper over our internal problems. But the internal problems start surfacing the moment their economy starts misfiring, or I won't say misfiring, it starts sneezing, like it's recently
Sputtering.
happening. Sputtering, yeah, sputtering is the right word, sir. So I think we are in interesting times. And now that you described the geopolitics, I'm looking forward to what you have to say about the geoeconomics. All yours, sir.
Okay, so basically, I'm talking about global economic order, which is it is undergoing a significant transformation. Is driven by shifts in economic power, technology advancement, and evolving international relations. The first element of this global economic order is rise of plurilateralism. There is a large number of group of countries which are becoming economic alliance partners and addressing their specific economic issues. And in that, we have RCEP, we have TTP, and then we have BRICS. And they are also got the the African coordination, which has now come up recently. So the question is that there is no longer dependence upon the major powers for support systems as well as for goods and services. There is enough growth between the medium powers and less developed countries to be able to sustain their development. That's one issue which is important. That also gets linked to the supply chains. You are no longer is the world totally depending on the Western supply chains. Of course, there are certain critical areas of technology where the West leads, but those West areas of technology are now being penetrated by some major developing countries, major emerging economies, i.e., India. China has already become a strong technology partner. Tomorrow, ASEAN countries is going to become strong technology players. As also we are seeing in countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and South Africa becoming important technology players. So the question basically we have to look at is this: is technology will not be Western agnostic or Eastern agnostic. Technology will be available whoever has the capacity to leverage that technology. And the the perception that you can stop giving GPUs and stop giving this or that to countries, or you can put AI in second tier of like the Americans are trying to do, will at best will be like we see in the case of TikTok, only a superficial element of trying to put pressure on developing economies. It will not function. It will not function primarily because the economies of scale are so high in these countries with the kind of population, the kind of growth that they have, and the potential that they have, and the manpower, the technological manpower that they are the only ones who have the capacity and capability to exploit them. So this is going to be the new norm. Efforts will be done toward technology denial, but their efforts will not succeed. And they will not succeed even in the case of China, as I will come to a little later. And then there is a reform to international institutions. One of the elements which happened that during the last BRICS summit in Russia was two things. One is creation of BRICS insurance mechanism, BRICS insurance mechanism. In that, no longer do you have to go to Lloyd's and other Western agencies for insurance. The insurance cover will be provided by within the BRICS nations. And the second issue that occurred was that there is now a move of larger intra-regional trades in currencies that they can handle, and ensure that a country which enters into a trade deal between A and B does not have to go to a Western banker and pay him 2 or 3% of charges for signing the deal. That's not going to happen. The deals will take place within their own self, and this is what is happening between us and Russia. This is also happening between 22 countries in India, where we have signed bilateral agreements. So this is a new norm which is going to come up. So the point which is important is this: while supply chains etc. Are going to be important, they are not going to be that effective in being able to provide the kind of leverages which the Western countries, most importantly, the United States, is trying to look at. Then there is, of course, like one of the elements that emerging out of this thing is that there is a shift in economic power. I mean, like I was trying to say, the middle powers are now becoming as strong, and that's the important issue that is going to be prevalent in the next couple of years. As far as economic challenges are concerned, rise in income inequalities between the countries and within the countries, climate change and environmental degradation, global debt and financial instability poses risks to the global economy. You cannot sustain an American economy which is $34 trillion in debt. If it is $34 trillion in debt, it is imperative that the dollar must remain the global's primary currency. Because if de-dollarization takes place, the debt gets called. Already we see a trend that the security bonds of that people have been buying in the United States, they are lowering their exposure. The Chinese have lowered their exposure close to about $500 billion. The Japanese have done, we have done about $180 billion, etc., etc. So there we're looking at the new shape of things that are emerging. So when we say that there is American influence of the big power is declining, what we are basically saying is there's a new shaping of the geopolitical and economic order that is taking place. And that is one thing which we need to take cognizance of. I'll finish this part over here, then I'll come to India and the evolving global system.
Yeah, can I butt in, sir?
Yeah.
So there are a few issues which I'd like to add on in the geoeconomics, which are going to come into prominence. Trump, no Trump. I mean, this is across the board.
Yeah.
I'll start with the last point first, which you mentioned about the American debt and de-dollarization, and their bonds and all that. While there is a issue on one side with American bonds, on the other hand, the Chinese bonds 10-year bonds are at an all-time low.
Yes.
And the yuan is at its weakest. And any fluctuation today in the American markets will hit this is the analysis, what people say, will hit the Chinese markets adversely. It's not only the Chinese market, it's the Chinese entire banking structure, because their banking structure is internally weak. This is a fact. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what the Chinese are saying. And this is what the Chinese are worried about. Because if any great fluctuation happens in the American economy, the first collapse will happen in the Chinese economy. So those of us who think de-dollarization ho jayega and we will be happy all over the world, and everyone will go live happily ever after. This, if de-dollarization happens beyond a point, and if there's a shake in the American economy, the first economy which will collapse is the Chinese economy, right? And the Chinese are very aware of it, and that is one of the reasons why we see Chinese are going soft on anti-American rhetoric, except in their tabloids. Right. The second point which you made, again going from the reverse, is that middle powers. The middle powers, like you rightly said, are getting out of proportion heft, because it is now emerging whichever side the middle powers are on, and that side, that power will be greater. Okay. The third thing which I'd like to, now I'm going to put about a few, two, three more issues which are of geoeconomics, which I thought I'll buttress what you said. The first among the art is space is the new frontier. The geoeconomics of space is just opening up. And space and energy have a huge connect. Today, countries which have a vibrant space program and who have the capability of undertaking independent space programs and getting energy from space will be the future superpowers. And what I see, and I'm not looking at the Western Hemisphere. I'm seeing the media in China. What do they talk? They say, look, India is the fourth power which has gone to space. It has done space docking. It has gone to the moon. It has got a Mangalyaan Mars program. It is all set to put a human space in flight. This is the fourth power. Like you rightly said in the beginning, this is the fourth power. And these four powers, Russia, China, India, and USA, of course, will be the superpowers of the future. Will it happen this year? It might not happen. Will it happen in the next 4-5 years? It might not happen. In the next 10 years, definitely. Because space is something which we have made tremendous progress, and that is completely independent of every other kind of technology. We're not dependent on anyone, or it is an independent program. That is important. The next point is that with whatever is happening in the Middle East, I'd like your comment on this also after I finish off. Revival of IMEC. While you said there are a lot of plurilaterals which are coming in, like RCEP, BRICS, BRI, and all other structures which are coming, TTP and all that, or for that matter, the Indo-Pacific Economic Construct, IPEF. The IPEC, I think, will see a revival, and that's going to, make its mark, especially now with the peace deal happening in Gaza and things like that. And I also see the North-South transport corridor with coming up. We'll see how it goes, but I think it should make some headway in this year. The next corridor, which is of global importance, and why Trump is going to Greenland, is the opening up of the Arctic corridor.
I was going to come up later. Okay, yes.
Is the opening of the Arctic corridor. And here again, sir, what I'd like to make a point is that Trump has now effectively shut China out of the Arctic route. He's very clear. He's done it in his own way, but he shut it out. And all projects of China in Greenland have been put on hold. In fact, they've been said, thank you. And Russia is too smart to allow China an entry into the Arctic region. And so China, which was positioning itself as a near Arctic power, it's very funny, near polar power, and it was putting out its polar Silk Route and all that, I think is in for a tough time. In fact, if you look at China, I think it's a overblown power. I'm not talking of it's an overblown power today. It faces a lot of issues. The last point which I'd like to make in geoeconomics, and that will affect everyone, is this business of AI and energy. The connect between AI and energy.
Absolutely.
The way people are investing into AI today is not funny. You rightly said in the beginning, before we started this show, that look, you have people, CEOs of Microsoft and Amazon, and, Tesla, and all these people at the Trump swearing in. Why these tech accelerators? The tech accelerators is the word which is coming up for these fellows. As all these people are heavily invested in AI, and the rumor mill, as they say, is that Elon Musk is on the verge of getting hold of TikTok, and that's why Trump is giving that whatever he's vowed to do, that 90-day extension. And Elon Musk holding TikTok and X is a lethal combination with his interest in space and EVs. So you see, there's a whole lot of geoeconomics coming that way. And the way AI is progressing, AI needs more and more energy. So if energy geoeconomics need, the Earth doesn't have enough energy. And that is why space program is very important for this new kind of geoeconomics. What I'm trying to say is the geoeconomics hitherto was all about supply chains and things like that, hard stuff. But where we are going, my view is that we are going into the business of AI, space, energy, and new trade corridors, where leveraging technology will be of greater value than hard facts of manufacturing and supply. I mean, this is what I had to say on this. I'd like your comments on this and your views on this before you take the next slide.
Okay. So I am generally in agreement with whatever you have said. A couple of points. See, a fundamental point is the new economies have two things which the world needs. They are incrementally making their manufacturing capabilities, as also are now the markets. For example, take a country like India. If India develops its manufacturing capability and it is also the market, then India does not have to go out too much to sell its products. And similarly, what we are seeing is that the large number of supply chains which were earlier resting in the developed world are now becoming part and parcel of the ASEAN and Indian corridors, and also now slowly going into the Gulf, particularly in UAE and other places. I totally agree with you on the IMEC. I was going to cover that IMEC in my West Asia section, but fine, now you brought it up. It's absolutely correct. IMEC is an important construct. It is not for any other reason, but it is to connect Mediterranean through the Saudi Peninsula and that region to the Gulf and onto India. An important trade route which will then, if it fructifies, will bring in so much of economic order and economic payoffs that it will make these people move away from their intestine fighting and get them involved into a more economic space. As far as AI and energy is concerned, totally 100% correct. While the space is going to take a little time, the whole rationale of Chinese making that dam on Sangpo and creating 800 gigabytes energy is basically to provide capacities and capabilities for its growing AI programs. This is also a lesson from India for India. We need to start looking at our power capacities, not only from just lighting up our this thing and our normal work resources, but also looking at usage of this large amount of technologies for advanced and emerging technologies like AI, quantum, etc. So this is absolutely correct, and I totally agree with you. And in that, I harnessing space and India becoming an important space power becomes an important perspective. So I am, let's put it this way, I just trying to amplify a couple of things that you said, but I'm generally in agreement with you. And I think this is an important discussion on global energy, that the move is no longer, dictated by supply chains and commercial agreements and free trade areas, etc. But the new elements of looking at economic growth and potential is this is what is going to be done by technologies and capabilities and manufacturing, and also harnessing the supply chains in a fashion in which the middle economies will play a major role. So that's the thesis I have on this.
Yeah, I completely go with you, sir. I just want to add something which you said and which one of our audience has also spoken of, which probably, you said it actually. You spoke of climate change.
Yeah.
With climate change, there's another packet which is coming, and this is what this gentleman has said. I want to put it is you're out in China because China is a net importer of energy and food. What he's brought out is not the fact that China is a net importer of energy and food, but climate change and food security is something which is there, which is on the horizon, which we need to be factoring in all our geoeconomics,
Yes.
because that is where we need, as India, we need to leverage our strength or protect our strength. And I just thought I'd put it across a point which
No,
you actually,
and that's why our initiatives on green energies are so important.
yeah,
And modular, small modular SMRs, reactors, etc., for which we are now also trying to go in. I mean, that's also becomes a very important issue.
completely agree with you, sir.
So
Yeah.
okay, now coming to the relatively of India and its relationship with major players. Fundamentally, I'll since the time is getting short, I will just come.
No, no, sir. You could please go ahead, sir. I think this is a very important discussion. People will enjoy it. I would. I see the good response. A lot of people are coming up with a lot of good comments.
Okay.
Your
So
views.
first is India-China relations. There is a thaw on the boundary, but it's a work in progress. We have had an SR meeting. We need to understand that this is not something which is over and done deal. It is a continuation of process. But two things we need to understand. One is that as a consequence of this standoff, what has happened is Chinese have built up huge infrastructure and capacities and deployed their forces much forward than they actually used to do earlier. So the Chinese are now on, frankly speaking, bang on the line of actual control or the nearby places. Chinese response periods have become that much smaller. Building up of habitats, etc., are also part and parcel of this same process. The second issue is that we will at some stage will need to negotiate new set of CBMs, taking cognizance of the new ground realities. This is something which we are not talking enough, but as we go along with the SR talks, this will have to happen, and there has to be a certain degree of give and take on this, and that is where our diplomatic prowess and our military capacities working in tandem will deliver. The third element of this is that economy. There were two elements. Why was China looking at resolving the boundary issue, certainly in 2024? General Shankar, in his myriad of talks and his this thing, is talked about the status of the Chinese economy. It is also understanding of the way the Chinese are now. There are two elements of the Chinese economy. There's an old economy which was based on production, gas oriented things, manufacturing sector, etc., etc., etc. But Xi Jinping is putting onus of what he calls as the new economy. And this new economy is based on what is called a technological oriented economy. Now, the old economy produced myriads of houses, myriads of infrastructure, huge amounts of dams, etc., etc., etc. But it suddenly found there are no takers. I've been to Shanghai a couple of times, and there are half the buildings in Shanghai are lying empty. It used to happen in olden days in Gurgaon also. So the question basically is, in the new economy, he needs to drive that new economy. And that new technology driven economy, his concern is basically is this: is India as an emerging power supported by the United States, which wants to relocate and redistribute some of its industries into India and make India as a technology agnostic country. That and they are seeing the example of what is happening in Apple, where the first Apple Indian Apple phone have already reached the shores of China, and Chinese are not very happy with it. An Indian made Apple is being used by the Chinese. So this is so what is happening. As a very interesting piece, Ambassador Gokhale written, and he talked about the fact is how China is imposing subtle restrictions on us.
And may I
Clearances
add
are
a
not being
point, sir?
given. Huh?
Yeah, may I add a point here, sir?
Ah,
I think you made a very important point. There's a very clear shift of technology shift, like the importance of the new economy,
yeah.
which is happening in India, which many of us don't understand. It is not like what you said, that Apple having a factory here and the shift taking place from China to here, and they're putting restrictions on us and all that. But there's something more interesting which is happening, which we are not, which is happening in front of our eyes, and that is companies like Microsoft are investing more than $3 billion
Yes.
voluntarily over the next 2 to 3 years in India. And why
For
is
the
that
India.
happening? Why is that happening? It's only Microsoft which has come out with it, others will follow. It's a matter of time. It is happening for AI. And I'll explain it to you because it's a new thing which I'm going to talk of, which
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
not many people in India understand. It is because AI needs two things at scale. One, it needs people to write code, right, and think through the whole thing, right. And the second,
second
it
power.
needs data and data, and both are costly today because the AI business has run out of internet data. So today people are talking of synthetic data, and the only country whose data and talent lies untapped is India today. And this is something and it is lying cheap. And the same kind of AI which is being produced in USA will come about 4 to 5 times costlier. And all big tech accelerators. Why I'm coming back to this point of tech accelerators, because Trump has a deep connect with these tech accelerators. Like you rightly said, all these fellows are sitting today getting as Trump is getting sworn in. These tech accelerators are betting big on India because they can't bet big on China. So this business of new economy has put us in a position where we have to think through this to leverage. Of course, our biggest problem, as you said earlier, is energy. Because for all this, will we have the energy to make this happen? Is a $100 billion question,
But
and that will have to happen only with the help of the West, not definitely the Chinese,
yes,
because
I
the
agree.
Chinese are the competitors for this in the big tech. So I mean, this I'm sorry, sir. I'm putting a lot of spokes in what your thinking is and your thing, but I thought I must put this across.
No,
Okay.
I am fully conscious of the role of the AI, the role of the data, and also the fact that we have the technical manpower for coding and etc. So this is the important thing. I mean, this is something our people need to understand and realize.
Understand? Yes.
And what is the changes taking place? We have this habit of every time looking at the West and for everything, but this is a shift
Shift which is happening.
which is
And,
happening
and
in
the shift is
about
not going to China, sir. The shift is
yeah,
happening into India.
into India, and India has to leverage that shift. And
Yeah.
India has to leverage that shift by ensuring capacities, ensuring capabilities, ensuring we have enough manpower who is trained. Skilling India is becoming also going to become an important issue in this. My last point on China is two issues. One simple point is we have to take cognizance of Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama, he is 80. His death, I mean, this is a reality of life. We all have to go. Is going to create some murmurs, some turmoil. We need to be prepared for it. And second thing is that while China is seeking opening of economy with us, we must be very clear what are we seeking from China. And we must have clarity in what we need from China. It is not that Chinese investments are coming, which sector is coming, etc., etc. No, there has to be a blueprint. We have to have a understanding of why we need Chinese technology, which areas do we need technology, in what terms do we need this technology, what is the quid pro quo of those technologies, what are the geopolitical quid pro quo of those technologies. We need to be looking at that. And last point again is that Chinese assertions, both in the maritime space and in the continental space and in our neighborhood, is something that will continue to happen because Chinese believe that you have to continue to pressure the opponent. It is even when you are building a relationship with him to ensure that he remains on the back foot. This is so far as China is concerned. Now coming to United States. As things stand today with the United States, there are 3-4 factors we need to take cognizance of. My assessment of the Trump administration is the geopolitically Trump administration looks at India as a strong Asian player, a complete power, which needs who can be an important strategic partner. United States is conscious of the fact that it is an offshore power. It cannot have the same capacities and capabilities as a strong power in the region can have in part of its overall China containment strategy. All the other alliance partners, be it Japan, be it Australia, be it Korea, be it Philippines, are limited power capabilities. He understands that all of them require the large presence of American power and influence. And that is costly. American military is suffering. Lately, the Americans have gone into Korea and seeking to get into ship development programs with them. Maybe not large capital ships, but certainly medium type ships which they require for their coastal patrolling, etc. So India is in the construct of new administration. There is a much clarity, sans illiberalism and liberalism and all kinds of those woke theses. You will find there will be a much more upfront dealing with India. Having said that, we must also be conscious of the fact is that we must create equities for transactional bargaining with the United States. I'm not going into details because that's not important. We need to create
Yeah, I agree with
transactions.
you.
We have to create a trade relationship. What is the nature of that trade relationship? What is we going to trade off? What are the areas that we need to trade? What is it? Why is it important for America to co-develop and 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 give technology transfers to us. What is it that India can do? India must do, and what do we expect America to do for us? Both things are relatively important. We have to create a blueprint of our interests. We have to be very clear that what are the go areas, which are no go areas with the United States, and we have to be very clear what are the offtakes from there, and what are we looking to get from the United States in this. It is not going to be one-sided relationship. We cannot afford to have that one-sided relationship. We have to understand that when when these people talk about giving India the same status as an ally, they are not talking through their hat. They understand what the geopolitics of the region are. America cannot be present all the time over here. And it has, like we said, its ability to project power is getting limited. It is coming up with new theses, but each one of them is so time consuming that they have no capabilities in the next 10 to 15 years. So this period of next 10 to 15 years, which is going to be central to maintaining a strategic balance of not so much of containment, but to push China into being a reasonable stakeholder for maintaining peace and security and order in the region. That is where India's power and influence will come into play. And here it is important for India to have a strong transactional relationship with this thing. What we have done in last few years. I'm very sorry to say that we have simply purchased items from United States. We have not been able to influence either the 404 deal or the 414 engines deal to a degree that we should have done. Today the situation is a $1 billion deal of 414 engines is going to jump to 1.5, and I dare say it will jump to about $2 billion. They are opening up factories here. They're opening up production lines over here. Yes, please do it. But at the end of the day, we must be very clear that all these elements must help in creating an adequate military capabilities and address our core defense capability concerns. That is something which we need to be very clear about, and this is where our relationship will have to function. It is not a question of this ITR that, the regulatory systems, etc., etc. We have to be upfront with Americans. You have your regulatory system, we have regulatory system. If we're going to work on regulatory system, we can say kiss goodbye to anybody else. Now, that if we want to have a strong relationship, then we have to look at this relationship from a larger perspective. Similarly, in trade, which are the areas that we want to trade in? You want to have a semiconductor factory? Your military wants to have a semiconductor factory over here? Sure, let's have it. Then don't put restrictions on the tier 2 or AI. Don't put GPU restrictions on India. You cannot do both things together. You have some limitations, your technological limitations, etc. Please come and discuss, and we find via medias. That is what our relationship with the United States is going to be. So it's going to be transactional. I suspect we have people in the United States government, this new government which just formed, will have a much better listening capacity. Not that the last one did not have, but I just give you a small example. Mr. Sullivan came here and they said that we will develop new technologies in ISET, critical and emerging technologies. Great. In quantum, let's say we're developing a new technology in quantum. But he also said in the same breath that we are concerned about its passage to Russia, so we'll have export regulations. These are small words, but they actually mean when you sit down on the negotiating table with the bureaucrats, you realize that he says, yeah, we cannot export these items because of regulatory framework. And then when you are investing large amounts of money, what are you trying to do with the money? Money is not for Indian systems. Indian systems have a limited capabilities. Yeah? We are doing that for export. After all, we have to export those items. If we make 414 engines in India, we are going to take 300, 200, 300, 400, whatever number of engines that we want to have. But beyond that, we will have to export. No. So that export has to have some clarity. Like we have now with the BrahMos system. We are selling it to everybody. We have that kind of a clarity with the Russians. So what I'm trying to say is that we will need to create transactional capacities on both sides, and we must be able to tell the Americans what our interests are and what the American interests are. And we can, if Americans want us to open certain sectors for investments in economic and manufacturing and technological investments, then we must examine them in detail and say what else do we want from the Americans in return. What the kind of technologies that we want from the Americans? That's something which we need to be looking at. That's all I have to say with the United States, because we can continue talking about small
Yes, sir.
things. As far as Russia is concerned, Russia will remain an important partner. There is no doubt about it. 40-50% of our arms come from them. Russia has always stood by us. Russia has supplied us oil when we were in deep trouble during the COVID. All that has happened. But we have to take the object realities that are emerging into cognizance. As the war goes on, as Russia comes under pressure, it is becoming more and more attracted to the Chinese. Chinese are investing a large amount of money. Chinese oil is going there. Chinese investments are coming there. In fact, the mainstay of the economic order of the Russians today is being supported by China. That's the reality. We are trying our best, but we are not there. Tomorrow, when there is a certain degree of let's say, ceasefire takes place, what shape Russia-China relationship will take place, etc., is something which we need to understand. If, on the other hand, the contest between the West and the East, like those four countries we were talking about, Russia, China, Iran, and today now they added Pakistan also, and maybe North Korea. If that new element of power rivalry comes up, India will have to take a certain degree of a stand. India should be very clear that we have a certain degree of equations with Russia, but how do we manage those equations with Russia going forward is something which we need to take care of, particularly when our defense partnership becomes less and less. If defense partnership is not the driver, oil is coming under sanctions, and oil is a partial driver. Strategic partnership with Russia, particularly in the continental Eurasia, is getting limited purely because of access. And Russian ability to influence geopolitics, like we discussed in the first part, is also getting limited. Then the question arises is, how do we collaborate and collate our interests together? No doubt we will. I'm not saying we will run away. But the question is, it is how do we manage that over a period of time? Which are the areas of interest? And we have to start looking at them now so that we build up capacities, capabilities together. We look at joint projects, look at joint technological cooperation and issues like that. Last point comes is Russia going to be a leverage vis-a-vis the Chinese? I think the jury is out. The jury is out in the sense that I don't think that's going to be a very serious issue. Chinese and Russians have one equation, like we and the Russians have a different equation. I don't think, and one of the best part of this relationship is that the Russians have never succumbed to the Chinese pressure of denying us equipment, etc., any of those things, particularly during the 4 years or long standoff with the Chinese. So this is the issue that we need to take cognizance of. As far as our other relationships are concerned, with Japan, we have a strong partnership, but the Japanese, unfortunately, remain east of the South China Sea. They do not go beyond, although they keep saying that they have interest in the Indian Ocean. Their trade lines are there, but they have no presence over there. Their capacities are getting limited, and also they are too involved in the in the Australia, South Korea, Philippines, and that squad, the new squad which has come up in terms of ensuring their own capacities and capabilities vis-a-vis the Chinese. And in this regard, it's important to understand, and this is something we have to highlight to the Americans, is that you cannot have an Indo-Pacific architecture which is only East Asia centric. So at some stage, Americans will have to start thinking in terms of collaborating closely with India. And in this regard, this talk which is now going on in the United States in certain circles of creating a Middle East command, which already has certain degree of contact with India. We have a fair degree of contact with India. A large number of joint projects are going on. That's something which needs to get a much more fructified and needs a much larger, uh, uh, let's put it this way, space, so that there is a degree of collaboration between us and the US-led alliance system or US-led arrangements in the Middle East. Because right now, Indian Ocean region, unfortunately, is our responsibility. And here, there is a realignment of power structures are taking place between the Chinese and the Pakistanis. Pakistanis are asking for a second strike capability in lieu of Gwadar. We see what is happening in Sri Lanka. General just now said that the Chinese have agreed to set up an oil refinery in Sri Lanka. They have already have a base in Bangladesh. The Chachufu, there is in Myanmar's west coast. There is already a major installation, oil installations from major oil tankers disgorge oil and is going up to the downstream refineries on the boundaries of Myanmar and China. So these things are all there. So the balance of power from Indian perspective in this region is under a state of flux. And added to this is our neighborhood. We do not have good relationship our neighborhood. We can provide it as much of soft pedal it as much as we want. But the reality of this is that we have not moved forward with Pakistan over a period of time. We do not have a good relationship with them. We have now a serious situation coming up in Bangladesh. Uh, Nepal, we have a working relationship, but it's not the kind of relationship we should be comfortable with. Myanmar is on boil, and in the northeast, situation is getting out of control. And if we do not stop that thing and address that issue, we will have a serious problems on all our borders. Already we have disputed borders with two of our major neighbors, and then we are now running a disputed border with the Bangladeshis. So that is going to consume further. The sad part we have to understand is this: we always talk about 3% of GDP, 4% of GDP in defense. No developing country like us can afford to continuously sustain such a large defense spending. We have to resolve some issues, look at the critical issues, and develop capacities, capabilities, and infrastructure to deal with those issues rather than having across the board and keep adding more security issues to ourselves. I'll stop here and then wait for your comments.
Thanks a lot, sir. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. As Mr. Trump is getting into his chair, we've spoken of the global order and where India stands. To all those who listen to us, this is only the start of a series. We're going to have on 23rd a webinar on this, and we'll follow it up because this is a pre-Trump kind of a overview. How things will change as days pass, we will keep tracking it. But let me also tell you, a lot will change, but even more will remain the same. And we have to adjust to these new realities or new shifts which are going to take place, new leaders, new technologies, new alignments, new everything. And this is going to be an ongoing affair, and we'll keep having this, thinking pattern as we go along. So with this, with your permission, sir, I'll take a few questions. I know it's a little late, we overshot time.
I'm okay.
I'll not take too much. I will not take too much time out of